as among the most important decisions that will be made during my incumbency in the office of the presidency.
Are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues by the two major candidates for the presidency.
To this great cause of making water available to the people of this state, and I salute him for it.
Few past U.S. presidents can match the popularity and lasting impact of JFK.
Unless the benefits of increased prosperity are shared by the people themselves.
Even today, many Americans view Kennedy as one of the greatest figures to grace the Oval Office.
Well, it depends on the weather, political and otherwise.
But was JFK's presidency truly remarkable? Did his tragic assassination elevate him to an undeserved pedestal? Join us as we explore the questionable things about JFK's presidency. The drama of the electoral battleground.
Unless the benefits of increased prosperity are shared by the people themselves.
In the tumultuous landscape of early 1960s United States foreign policy, the spotlight was glaringly fixated on the Cuban Revolution and the ascent of Fidel Castro to power. On the 90-60 campaign trail, the enigmatic head of the CIA, Allen Dulles, played the role of informant to then President-elect Kennedy. However, in this cloak-and-dagger exchange, Dulles only hinted at Cuba's presence in the United States foreign policy playbook, conveniently omitting the covert schemes underway, an intricate dance orchestrated by the Eisenhower administration and the CIA that would later unveil itself as the infamous Bay of Pigs invasion. The narrative takes a gripping turn when it becomes apparent that Kennedy, in Dulles's eyes, was steering Cuba into the welcoming arms of the Soviet Union. The political theater during the presidential debates.
That is first thought, first if, first when, but first period.
Kennedy's adversary, Vice President Richard Nixon, pointed an accusatory finger.
Are proud to provide facilities for a discussion of issues by the two major candidates for the presidency.
Decrying Kennedy's perceived weakness against the communist threat in Cuba. In a bold comeback, Kennedy took to the prestigious pages of the New York Times, rallying for the Eisenhower administration to aid indigenous Cuban forces in toppling Castro. In the shadows, Nixon, shielded by the guise of protecting a covert CIA operation, dismissed Kennedy's plea as dangerously irresponsible. The tension escalated, with Nixon fuming and attributing his election defeat to what he believed was Kennedy's cunning strategy.
Where we're less well prepared, to which we give far less attention, not nearly enough attention, we've got to organize our government.
Little did he know, Kennedy had not been privy to Dulles's classified briefing on the Cuba operation, leaving Nixon's anger misplaced and his accusations unfounded.
And even the Polish government moved some different distance away from the Soviet Union.
Fast forward to the electoral battleground of 90-60, where the seemingly resounding victory of Kennedy with 303 electoral votes to Nixon's 219 belied the razor-thin nature of the popular vote. The numbers told a story of mere thousands, 120,000 to be precise, out of the colossal 68 million ballots cast, making this a nail-biter of an election. The drama of the pre-election polls, where Kennedy and Nixon teetered on the edge of parity a mere 3 months earlier, a Gallup poll portrayed them as virtual equals, and on the eve of the election,
to this great cause of making water available to the people of this state, and I salute him for it.
their difference was a mere percentage point. The aftermath of Kennedy's triumph echoed with accusations, particularly centering on Illinois and Texas, a combined electoral jackpot of 47 votes that could have swung the outcome in Nixon's favor. Allegations of ballot box stuffing and widespread voter fraud echoed loudly, pointing fingers at Democratic figures like Chicago Mayor Richard Daley and Kennedy's running mate, Senator Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas. Yet, despite the uproar, concrete evidence of foul play remains elusive, leaving historians to engage in spirited debates over the veracity of these claims. Nixon, however, opted not to formally challenge the results, leaving the 1960 presidential elections etched in the annals of history as a close contest laden with political theatrics and behind-the-scenes machinations. JFK's covert war in Vietnam. In the fervor of his 1960 campaign, John F. Kennedy made an electrifying vow to the American people. If elected, he would employ an array of ingenious strategies to confront communism wherever it reared its head. This commitment came to life vividly in his approach to the Vietnam War, a chapter filled with gripping details. As Kennedy assumed the presidency, Vietnam found itself in the clutches of a full-blown crisis. The government of the Republic of Vietnam, led by the charismatic President Ngo Dinh Diem in the south, grappled with intense pressure from Vietnam, a formidable opposition coalition rooted in the north. By 1959, the Viet Minh had crystallized their mission, vanquishing the forces of the Republic of Vietnam and forging a united nation under the banner of a singular communist government. To bolster President Diem's resistance against this ominous threat, Kennedy unleashed Operation Beef Up, a covert military campaign that marked the United States' deepening involvement in the Vietnam War. This clandestine operation witnessed a surge in United States troop numbers, escalating from a modest 3,000 in 1961 to a formidable 17,000 by 1963. This covert reinforcement allowed the United States to discreetly support the actions of the Republic of Vietnam's army in their relentless struggle against the elusive Viet Cong. Despite the United States troops' possession of superior weapons, advanced military training, and special capabilities, the Viet Cong's guerrilla tactics proved to be a formidable adversary. The intricate dance between the two forces unfolded against a backdrop of covert operations, shadowy maneuvers, and a relentless cat-and-mouse game. In a tragic twist of fate, President Diem met his demise in November 1963, falling prey to a meticulously executed assassination plot. By 1975, Vietnam had succumbed to the red tide of communism, marking a pivotal moment in history. The narrative of the Vietnam War stands as a riveting saga where political intrigue, covert operations, and the indomitable spirit of Viet Cong wove a complex hanging of conflict and consequence. The Alliance for Progress. When Kennedy assumed the presidency in January 1961, the looming specter of communism in Latin America grabbed his attention with a firm grip. The recent ascents of charismatic leaders like Fidel Castro and Che Jagan to power in Latin American countries served as glaring indicators that communism had stealthily infiltrated the Western Hemisphere. This geopolitical puzzle became an obsession for Kennedy.
How is your aching back?
Who was resolute in preventing the ideological contagion from spreading any further. In a strategic move in mid-March 1961, Kennedy unveiled his master plan to counter the communist threat, the creation of the Alliance for Progress in Latin America. This wasn't just another policy. It was Kennedy's vision for prosperity, eloquently expressed with the words, "For no real progress is possible unless the benefits of increased prosperity are shared by the people themselves." This marked the beginning of an ambitious initiative aimed at eradicating inequality and poverty in Latin America through targeted programs addressing illiteracy and public health.
Well, it depends on the weather, political and otherwise.
Fast forward to August of the same year, and the charismatic couple, John and Jacqueline Kennedy, embarked on a journey to Uruguay to inaugurate the Alliance for Progress in Punta del Este. The setting was picturesque, but the challenges were monumental. The alliance, intended to receive a hefty federal funding of $10 billion over a decade, encountered a twist. A portion of the funds was diverted to create paramilitary forces to combat communism. A far cry from the robust financial support witnessed with the Marshall Plan in post-war Europe. As the Alliance for Progress unfolded, some pockets of improvement emerged in housing, education, and public health. However, the overall narrative was one of disappointment and setbacks.
We have had our failures, but so have others, even if they do not admit them.
Economic growth failed to match expectations, unemployment soared, and the region experienced no less than 6 military coups during Kennedy's presidency. During these turbulent times, rapid population growth overshadowed the strides made in poverty reduction and public health. Adding to the complexity, Latin American leaders found themselves torn between the fear of communism and the increasing apprehension of Washington's influence. The Alliance for Progress, initially a beacon of hope, turned into a cautionary tale of unmet expectations and geopolitical miscalculations. Far from the envisioned progress, the initiative faced headwinds that would leave a lasting impact on the region's trajectory.
That the only way we can make economic progress is through dictatorship.
The Bay of Pigs. In the year of 1959, a left-wing movement in Cuba reached its boiling point, culminating in the ousting of President Fenio Batista. Premier Fidel Castro seized power, marking a significant shift in the country's political landscape. The newly established Castro regime wasted no time in cutting off strong ties with the United States, opting instead for a strategic alliance with the Communist Soviet Union. The sudden developments in Cuba raised eyebrows in the United States, especially under the leadership of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Concerned about the proximity of Cuba to American shores, Eisenhower directed the CIA to launch a covert operation in March 1960 aimed at overthrowing Fidel Castro. The plan involved forming a military force, Brigade 2506, comprised of exiled Cuban counter-revolutionaries who had fled the country after Castro's rise to power. Fast forward to the Kennedy era. The newly elected president was briefed on the ambitious invasion plan. Convinced of the threat posed by Castro's ties with the Soviet Union, Kennedy gave the green light for the covert operation, hoping to remove or eliminate the perceived menace. Little did he know that the plan was about to unravel in a spectacular fashion. The Bay of Pigs invasion commenced on April 17, 1961, with Brigade 2506 landing at the Cuban shores. However, their American-trained forces faced a formidable opponent in the Cuban armed forces under the direct command of Fidel Castro. In a stunning turn of events, the invasion collapsed within 2 days, resulting in a resounding defeat for the exiled Cuban forces. The aftermath was a sobering reality for the Kennedy administration. Out of the 1,400 Cuban exiles who participated, 118 were killed, 360 wounded, and over 1,200 captured. The failed invasion not only emboldened Castro, but also intensified his commitment to strengthening ties with the Soviet Union, delivering a diplomatic blow to the Kennedy regime. The Bay of Pigs fiasco marked a turbulent beginning for Kennedy's presidency, hinting at the unpredictable challenges that lay ahead. It was a chapter in history where covert operations, political miscalculations, and Cold War tensions collided on the shores of Cuba, leaving an indelible mark on international relations.
With the help of all those who labor the space endeavor.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. Back in the days of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was downright terrifying for many Americans. October rolls around, and suddenly, the Kennedy administration drops a bombshell. Literally, they spill the beans that the Soviet Union is sneakily placing nuclear missiles just 90 miles away from sunny Florida on the cozy island of Cuba. Kennedy, not one to mess around, throws a maritime blockade around Cuba, essentially saying, "You better remove those missiles or we're going full-on nuclear war, my friend."
And do all this, and do it right, and do it first.
It was like the ultimate game of chicken, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. The tension reaches a peak when a United States spy plane gets shot down over Cuba on October 27. At this point, everyone's thinking, this is it. We're going to war. At the 11th hour, Kennedy and the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev decide to play nice and find a middle ground. Crisis averted. The Kennedy administration actually knew about those sneaky Soviet missiles a whopping month and a half before the crisis hit the fan. Kennedy got wind of the situation on August 29 when a spy plane snapped pictures of the missile hideouts. Kennedy, fearing a scandal right before the midterm elections, decides to bury the report. The plot thickens when, weeks later, a United States spy plane bites the dust over Soviet territory. Panicking, Kennedy pulls the plug on all U-2 flights over Cuba. In the United States blind spot, the Soviets swiftly move in and plant 99 nuclear missiles on October 4. The big reveal happens when U-2 flights resume, triggering the Cuban Missile Crisis. Fast forward a bit too, after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, Kennedy's still itching to oust Castro, so he launches Operation Mongoose in January 1962. Think of it as the sequel, where Kennedy's brother Robert handpicks CIA hotshot Edward Lansdale to lead the charge. But Lansdale's not flying solo. William Harvey, another CIA big shot, joins the party. Facing roadblocks left and right, Harvey thinks outside the box. His genius plan was to enlist the mafia to off Castro.
It will be done during the terms of office of some of the people who sit here on this platform, but it will be done.
He contacts mobsters Sam Giancana and Johnny Roselli, handing them poison pills to serve Castro. Spoiler alert, the mobsters drop the ball and the hit doesn't happen. Another attempt involves a scuba suit laced with deadly fungi and tuberculosis. Sadly, the suit never reaches its destination. After JFK's tragic assassination in November 1963, President Lyndon Johnson decides to pull the plug on Operation Mongoose. The wild ride finally comes to an end.
Whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price.
diplomatic roller coaster at the Vienna Summit. Just a few weeks after the Bay of Pigs invasion debacle, President Kennedy found himself embroiled in yet another challenging encounter, this time with Nikita Khrushchev, the wily premier of the Soviet Union. In a bid to shore up his image as a formidable leader, Kennedy impulsively jetted off to the June 1961 summit in Vienna, blissfully ignorant of the diplomatic storm awaiting him. At the age of 44, JFK was acutely aware that seasoned leaders like Khrushchev often dismissed younger counterparts as mere novices in the complex realm of war and military affairs. Complicating matters was Kennedy's international reputation, already sullied by the Bay of Pigs fiasco. In an attempt to assert himself, Kennedy decided to engage Khrushchev in topics he had little understanding of, blatantly ignoring the well-intentioned warnings from his advisors.
And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words.
According to the insightful Richard Reeves, a journalism professor at the University of Southern California and author of President Kennedy, Profile of Power, the summit unfolded as a catastrophic clash of diplomatic titans. Kennedy, heedless of Khrushchev's reputation for ruthlessness, entered the summit unprepared, only to be outmaneuvered by the seasoned Soviet leader. The discussions took an unexpected turn as Kennedy delved into topics such as communist ideology, prompting hours of heated debate on Marxism, British imperialism, and a plethora of subjects he had no intention of defending. Khrushchev's brazen aggression during the talks not only stunned Kennedy, but also left Secretary of State Dean Rusk bewildered. The summit concluded without any substantial achievements, leaving Kennedy grappling with the realization that he had emerged from the meeting with his image further tarnished, similar to a weakened statesman. 2 months later, the political landscape underwent a seismic shift as the Soviets erected the Berlin Wall, a tangible manifestation of the escalating tensions among the world's most powerful nations. The Vienna Summit, rife with miscalculations and unexpected twists, had unwittingly set the stage for a pivotal moment in Cold War history.
13,000 files related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. In the dimly lit corridors of power, where secrets whispered and shadows danced, John F. Kennedy's presidency held a mysterious tale that few dared to unveil. It was the autumn of 1962, a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The charismatic leader had successfully navigated the treacherous waters, but rumors of a covert deal began to circulate. Deep within the bowels of the White House, a clandestine meeting took place between JFK and a mysterious envoy from the Soviet Union. The air was thick with tension as they huddled in a secret chamber, their voices barely audible over the distant echoes of political discussions. The nature of their conversation raised eyebrows among Kennedy's closest advisors. Whispers of a deal that went beyond the public narrative began to spread like wildfire. Some claimed it involved the exchange of classified information, while others speculated about hidden agendas and clandestine alliances. Amidst the intrigue, an investigative journalist named Evelyn Harper embarked on a relentless quest for the truth. Armed with a tenacity that matched her sharp intellect, she delved into the underbelly of Kennedy's presidency, determined to unearth the questionable dealings that lurked beneath the surface. As Evelyn dug deeper, she stumbled upon a trail of breadcrumbs that led her to an enigmatic figure known only as the Whisperer. This mysterious informant claimed to possess insider knowledge of the darkest secrets within the Kennedy administration. Their cryptic messages hinted at a web of deceit and manipulation that extended far beyond the public's gaze. The deeper Evelyn delved, the more dangerous the game became. She found herself entangled in a web of conspiracies where loyalty was a rare commodity and deception the currency of power. As she raced against time to expose the truth, Evelyn discovered that the questionable things about JFK's presidency went beyond political maneuvering. In a shocking twist, she uncovered a covert operation that involved mind-altering experiments conducted on unsuspecting individuals. The dark corners of the government held secrets of experimentation with hallucinogenic substances, intended to create a generation of puppet-like agents under the guise of national security. The revelations sent shockwaves through the nation, challenging the very foundations of trust in the highest echelons of power. Kennedy's legacy, once untarnished, now bore the weight of questionable decisions that raised raised haunting questions about the true nature of leadership. As the story unfolded, Evelyn Harper faced not only the threat of those who sought to silence her, but also the moral dilemma of exposing the darker shades of a beloved leader. The tale of JFK's presidency became a cautionary narrative, a reminder that even the most charismatic leaders could harbor secrets that shook the very fabric of democracy. What are your thoughts on questionable things about JFK's presidency? Let us have your opinions in the comments below. The Berlin Crisis. Before Kennedy assumed the presidency, Germany found itself in the throes of a political crisis post-World War II. The tension escalated dramatically on November 10, 1958, when Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev delivered a fiery speech, demanding the withdrawal of Western forces from West Berlin within 6 months. This set the stage for a tumultuous 3-year period where Berlin became the focal point of geopolitical turmoil. Amidst the escalating crisis, West Berlin thrived under the influence of Western powers, experiencing a capitalist boom that brought unprecedented prosperity. On the flip side, East Berlin succumbed to the gradual grip of communism, leading to a stark contrast that captivated the inhabitants of the East. The allure of Western development triggered a mass exodus from the East, as people sought a better life in the flourishing West. In 1958, Khrushchev's demand for the United States to pull out of the city prompted President Eisenhower to stand firm against Soviet pressure. When Kennedy took over, he inherited this volatile situation and faced another ultimatum from Khrushchev in 1961. Rather than succumb to the demands, Kennedy took a bold stance, activating 150,000 reservists, increasing defense expenditure, and preparing for a potential war over Berlin's future. The morning of August 31st, 1961, started like any other day in Berlin, but it marked a turning point in history. East German leader Walter Ulbricht ordered the overnight construction of a barbed wire fence, abruptly separating East and West Germany. The freedom of movement that once defined the region vanished overnight, leaving Berliners stunned. The construction of the Berlin Wall, rising ominously overnight, became an enduring symbol of the Cold War in Europe. It not only restricted Western influence on the East, but also shattered the unity that once characterized the city. This unexpected and rapid development shocked the world and forever altered the course of history. As the Berlin Wall stood tall, it became a poignant reminder of the deep-seated tensions and power struggles of the Cold War era. Kennedy's handling of the crisis, marked by confrontations with Khrushchev and a steadfast refusal to yield, added another layer of complexity to an already intricate narrative. Many critics attributed the escalation of the crisis to Kennedy's perceived lack of experience, creating a lasting stain on his presidential legacy. The African chessboard. President Kennedy found himself navigating a complex web of challenges not only in Latin America, but also in his dealings with Africa. During the intensity of his 1960 campaign against Vice President Richard Nixon, Kennedy boldly critiqued the Eisenhower administration's stance on Africa. However, as he stepped into the presidency in 1961, a striking continuity persisted in their African policies. Kennedy, deeply troubled by the specter of communism, cast a concerned eye on Africa, paralleling his worries in Vietnam. The Soviet Union's increasing foothold in the Northeast region heightened his anxieties. In response, Kennedy embarked on a strategy of offering financial incentives to sway neutral African leaders towards the United States fold, a chess game played against the Soviet Union. Yet, during this geopolitical maneuvering, Kennedy's administration fell short in championing the genuine aspirations of African nationalism and independence. South Africa, a hotspot of racial tension with its deeply embedded apartheid policies, became a thorny challenge for Kennedy. Despite symbolic gestures against white supremacist policies, the administration's inaction allowed Afrikaner rule to persist. Strangely, the United States continued to engage in trade reliant on South Africa's precious minerals, showcasing a paradoxical dance between diplomatic gestures and economic interests. The Kennedy administration found itself entangled in the unfolding drama of the Congo crisis. Beginning in 1960, the Congolese were on the precipice of independence from Belgium, a cause initially supported by the Eisenhower team. However, the situation spiraled into chaos, marked by a mutiny and power struggle. Colonel Joseph Mobutu emerged as a key player, orchestrating a coup that the Kennedy administration promptly backed. To solidify their alliance, Kennedy facilitated Mobutu's attendance at a parachute training school in Fort Benning, Georgia.
And therefore,
As a free man, I take pride in the words,
an unusual but powerful symbol of their burgeoning relationship. Mobutu, rechristening the country as Zaire, ruled for 3 tumultuous decades, marked by instability, rebellions, and a reputation for corruption. Kennedy's support, though contributing to Mobutu's ascent, inadvertently set the stage for a prolonged and troubled chapter in Zaire's history. In the intricate hanging of Kennedy's African policies, the threads of geopolitics, human rights, and economic interests wove together, leaving a nuanced legacy that transcends simplistic narratives: the assassination. In the brisk morning of a November Friday in 1963, at precisely 23 minutes to 12, the president's aircraft touched down at Dallas Airport. The air was filled with a sense of anticipation, and President Kennedy and Vice President Lyndon Johnson arrived in Dallas for a scheduled speech. The president, accompanied by his wife, Jackie, Texas Governor John Connally, and Connally's wife, Nellie, embarked on a ride through the vibrant streets of downtown Dallas. The atmosphere was electric, with cheering spectators lining the streets. Suddenly, gunshots shattered the air. Kennedy was struck in the head, blood staining his appearance. The shots also wounded Governor Connally. Swiftly, the president was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The gravity of the situation was conveyed to the public, with a voiceover announcing the tragic events. As the nation grappled with the shocking news, a 24-year-old former Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald emerged as the prime suspect. A self-declared communist, Oswald had renounced his American citizenship, lived in the Soviet Union, and returned disenchanted. On that fateful morning in November, he positioned himself on the 6th story of a Dallas building, firing shots at the president with a rifle before fleeing. Oswald's escape led to a manhunt, during which he fatally shot a Dallas police officer before being apprehended at a movie theater. Despite Oswald's claims of innocence, the FBI, led by Director John Edgar Hoover, swiftly concluded that he acted alone, driven by communist sympathies and frustration. On the same day, Vice President Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as the new president, hastily returning to Washington. The FBI descended upon Dallas, with Hoover asserting Oswald's guilt before a thorough investigation took place. The justice system was poised to bring Oswald to trial, where evidence could be scrutinized and closure sought for the nation. However, 2 days after the assassination, as Oswald was being transferred, nightclub owner Jack Ruby emerged from the crowd, shooting him in front of police officers and reporters. Oswald succumbed to his injuries at the hospital, mirroring the tragic fate of President Kennedy just 48 hours earlier. The cover-up. Step back in time to the 1960s in America, an era that reverberated with the echoes of the Cold War, a period marked by the ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation. The nation gripped by an atmosphere of perpetual vigilance and heightened anxiety as the United States and the Soviet Union stood locked in a tense standoff. The mere thought of an assassination plot brewing to topple the government would send shockwaves through the collective psyche of the American public.
and they may be less public. To be sure,
Amplify that anxiety by contemplating the chilling prospect of the Soviet Union or Cuba's communist regime orchestrating the sinister plan, and they have a recipe for national pandemonium. This is not just a narrative of a lone 24-year-old communist sympathizer, it's a story woven with the potential involvement of geopolitical giants. The fear of a conspiracy doesn't merely apply pressure for retaliation, it could spark a perilous escalation with another nuclear-armed nation. To add another layer of interest, consider that during this tumultuous period, the CIA was secretly plotting the demise of Fidel Castro, the charismatic leader of Cuba. An undercover operation of such magnitude was a closely guarded secret, and the last thing they needed was the risk of exposure through a thorough investigation into a possible conspiracy with Cuba. The cryptic memos, the rushed conclusions, the insistence that Oswald acted alone, and the mysterious fixation on just 3 bullets. These elements seem less like a conclusive truth and more like a frantic effort by a cadre of government officials scrambling to maintain control. Their mission is ensuring the tranquility of the American public while sidestepping the brink of a potential confrontation with the Soviet Union. The secret phone calls of the new president, and they'll feel the palpable anxiety about crafting a simplified version of events to unite the American people, because alternative theories could pose an existential threat to the entire system. In this intricate hanging, the government's strategy unfolds. Seize control of the narrative, manipulate the investigation, and steadfastly adhere to the straightforward story that Oswald, acting alone, was the mastermind. It's a riveting story of power dynamics, secret operations, and a delicate dance on the edge of chaos, revealing a dimension of history that is as captivating as it is perplexing. Pentagon Papers and JFK's Secret to Vietnam War. The Pentagon Papers, a treasure trove of classified information unleashed in 1971, painted a vivid picture of the Department of Defense's covert maneuvers in Indochina until 1968. Imagine thousands of pages unveiling a clandestine world, secret campaigns stretching across Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The revelations shook the American public, exposing a military America vastly different from the one they thought they knew. Behind the scenes, the CIA ran amok, prompting conspiracy theorists to connect the dots back to the untimely demise of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Daniel Ellsberg, the audacious activist responsible for bringing the papers to light, found himself in a web of uncertainty regarding Kennedy's Vietnam stance. In a dramatic turn of events, he sought answers from JFK's brother, Robert Kennedy, a man whose fate mirrored the tragic twists of his brother's life. RFK divulged that JFK, against the counsel of his top advisors, resisted sending combat troops to Vietnam, a determination forged from witnessing the French struggles in 1951.
All those who labor the space endeavor with the help and support of all Americans.
A commitment to spare the United States from a similar quagmire. The genesis of JFK's foresight traces back to Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield's eye-opening mission to South Vietnam in 1962. Mansfield's candid advice against involvement left an indelible mark on JFK, leading him to pen the historic Memorandum 217, restricting military and civilian entry into South Vietnam without State Department clearance. The memo sent shockwaves through the Pentagon, a prelude to the tumultuous decisions ahead. As JFK contemplated a complete withdrawal in 1965, he confided in his confidant, Kenneth O'Donnell, foreseeing the storm of criticism he would weather. In 1965, "I'll become one of the most unpopular presidents in history," he predicted, willing to face the political tempest to safeguard against a potential quagmire.
Should be the site of this center and this school, for this city has long been the home.
Post-JFK's assassination, the military swiftly executed plans to deploy combat troops, citing an alleged unprovoked attack in the Gulf of Tonkin. However, subsequent investigations unveiled a murky narrative, with manipulated or even fabricated details providing a dubious pretext for the Vietnam War. The Tonkin Gulf Resolution bestowed unprecedented power upon the president in Southeast Asia, a power eagerly wielded by both Lyndon Johnson and later Richard Nixon. In a plot twist, declassified documents from the National Security Agency in 2005 and 2006 laid bare the deceit woven into the Gulf of Tonkin narrative. Congress, unwittingly misled, found itself entangled in a web of misinformation, adding another layer to the complex hanging of historical events. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.